Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. I am your host, Jeff Seltzer. Every week I interview someone about their interests, their life, their stories, whatever they've experienced. I'm trying to learn as much as I can about people, help them share their stories, share a few of mine along the way as well. If you're new to the pod, thank you so much for giving it a shot and checking it out. I think you have a lot of fun on this journey with me. If you've been listening to it before, thank you so much for coming back again. As always, please follow us on the various socials, review, like, comment, all that kind of fun stuff. Auto download if you can. That obviously helps the algorithm, whatever that means. Currently, I am working on some merchandise for the pod. So I'm thinking about some hats, maybe some shirts. If you'd be interested in supporting the pod and getting some of this, let me know. Outside of that, I do have some stickers that I finally had printed out. If you'd like one, DM me. I'll see if I can ship you a couple. Beyond that, just as a reminder, on Instagram, we're on Everybody Has a Story Pod. YouTube, Everybody Has a Story Pod. My personal Insta is at Seltzer77. If you want to email me directly, you can email me at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. Additionally, for everything Jeff Seltzer, you can go to jeffseltzer.com where you can look at everything about the podcast. You can look at background. You can look at how to reach me as well. Any other cool videos, photos, stories, etc. Any of that kind of stuff. From a podcast perspective, as you probably know, we're on Spotify. We're on Apple. We are on Amazon. We are on iHeartRadio, all those types of things. Pretty much anywhere you could think of podcasts would be. That's where we currently are. I have a really, really cool show this week, I think. The guest that we have is someone who has a huge passion for wrestling, which, as you guys probably know about me, I also have a huge passion for wrestling. She travels to lots of wrestling shows. She has a lot of really cool stories, a lot of really cool experiences she's had. And the two of us sort of kind of almost met at a wrestling show or convention a few years ago as well. And it was out of her kindness and generosity that we actually connected. So we'll get to that story in a little bit. But without further ado, I want to introduce my guest for this week is Christina.
Hello.
Hey, Christina. How are you doing? How are you, Christina?
Jeff. I'm good. How are you?
Good. So first of all, thanks for joining. It's great to, I guess, virtually meet you for the first time.
Yes, thank you. It's
of course.
To meet you too, finally.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been connected via social media for the last couple of years. Like I said before, you, out of the kindness of your heart, you reached out and shared some photos and videos of my daughter and I having an experience with a wrestler, which was really, really nice. Most people would have kind of seen it and said, okay, whatever. But you went out of your way on Twitter, found me, sent it over to me, which was really, really amazing. So thank you. With that said, I want to see if you can just briefly introduce yourself so that way the listeners and the viewers can know who Christina is and kind of what makes you tick.
Hi. Okay. I'm Christina. My Instagram is christina.attempts.life. My Twitter is Christina_tries. Yes, that one is an Orange Cassidy reference. If you're familiar with Orange Cassidy, which you will be by the end of this, probably. And then basically I sent Jeff a video of him with Kip Sabian. So like he got to hold Kip Sabian's box head, which was really cool. And like that day at that convention, it was Wrestle Bash, I believe. And I had no sleep that day at all. And I had woken up. Well, if I did get sleep, it was like 2 hours of sleep. I had to go fly to the Philadelphia airport at 5:30 a.m. And then from there, I rented a car and drove 2 hours to get to Parsippany, New Jersey, so that I could see Orange Cassidy. And it was like super hot in there, and there were so many people everywhere. It was super crowded. But yeah, like it was just like that's the kind of stuff that I do. I just travel to places and I try to find ways to get to shows in the most economical way I can, and just so I can get back home as quickly as possible. So
awesome. Hey, Christina, thank you for sharing. So for those of you that aren't necessarily aware of what wrestling conventions are, so on a previous episode, we talked about WrestleCon, which is basically during WrestleMania week when basically every non-WWE wrestler is there. You can get pictures, you can get autographs, whatever you want to pay for, you can pretty much get. Well, wrestling conventions, which WrestleCon is one of them, Wrestle Bash, which Christina was just mentioning, is very similar. So similar to Comic-Con, where you can go in the city, you can meet various like movie stars, whatever else like that. Wrestling conventions are the same, but it's all wrestling. So in a wrestling convention, you show up, usually anywhere between 10 to 300 wrestlers there, depending upon how big the convention is. Usually non-WWE guys, so you get a lot of independent guys, people on their way up, people on their way down, AEW guys, TNA wrestling guys, which are just different wrestling companies. And you get really cool experiences. So you get a lot of guys, some of them are people you've seen on TV years ago. So at the convention that Christina was mentioning, like X-Pac, who years ago was 1-2-3 Kid, was at the show. Booker T, like various wrestlers like that. You also have other wrestlers like Orange Cassidy, who we'll get into in a bit, who's one of Christina's favorites. I think she's probably one of his biggest fans, if not his biggest fan. So people like that. And you also get a lot of like unknowns or people who are on their way up. So one of my favorite wrestlers nowadays who wrestles a bit in House of Glory Wrestling, she just won the championship last weekend, as well as in GCW Wrestling, is Megan Bain. So definitely on her way up. Got an opportunity to meet her at that show. So the show Christina's talking about was called Wrestle Bash. It was about 2 years ago in Parsippany, New Jersey, as she had mentioned, which coincidentally, Parsippany is about 10 minutes from my house. So while Christina, it sounds like, had a heck of a travel day, we basically, my daughter and I, got in the car. We drove, a couple of miles and everywhere. So definitely different travel experiences, but, it was an amazing convention. What I was alluding to earlier also was, and as Christina mentioned, so there's a wrestler named Kip Sabian, and his wife is Penelope Ford, both in real life as well as in wrestling. And at the time, he was recovering from injury, and he would sit in the crowd at a lot of wrestling shows, and he had a cardboard box over his head. Just kind of like a goof of sorts, but a way to kind of keep himself relevant. So getting a photo or video with him holding the box, or even us holding or carrying the box or wearing the box, is like a really cool experience. So at the convention, Robin, my older daughter, and I were getting a picture with Kip Sabian, and we got a still shot. But Christina, who was probably a few more feet away, and I didn't know her at the time, took video of this, which was a really, really cool experience. So later in the day, she posted to Twitter and was like, hey, here's some pictures and videos from my experience today. And I was like, wow, that's me. And so we're going back and forth, and she was able to get me the video, which is really awesome. Like I said before, most people would have either ignored it or just, said whatever. But Christina definitely went out of her way to get me the footage, which was awesome. I love the video. I love the shot of it. So, again, so many thanks to you, Christina, for that. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Of course. It was actually a really weird weekend for me. So just a long story short, my wife and my younger daughter were away at Disney World for the week. So I planned an amazing weekend for myself and my older daughter. I went to Wrestle Bash that morning. And then that night we went to Pizza Party Pro Wrestling down in Manville, New Jersey, which was probably the weirdest show that I've ever been to. It was in Manville. I think there were about 30 people in the crowd, maybe about 35 wrestlers. So doing the math, I paid about $10 for the ticket. So nobody really made any money that day, from a wrestler's perspective, I guess. So we had a lot of fun with that. We saw Bobby Orlando, a bunch of other guys that are really big fans of CPA. That night we went home. Next morning we went to the city, saw Dear Evan Hansen on Broadway, which was amazing. And then the next morning I woke up with COVID. So that was definitely quite a weekend for me. Fortunately, it sounds like, my daughter, who was with me the whole time, she never got COVID. I guess I wasn't contagious or whatever. Definitely made for a challenging week afterwards, but definitely made the most of that weekend, which was amazing. Christina, on the other hand, you said that you flew in, you got in there early, and I assume this is because you heard Orange Cassidy was going to be at the convention. Is that the draw for you?
Yes.
So this was back in 2022, August of. Was this, I guess, how far back? And let me take a step back here. So Orange Cassidy is a professional wrestler who's been around for quite some time. So for those of you that aren't aware, Orange Cassidy is, so I'm 46. I think he's probably late 30s or early 40s, but he's been wrestling for quite some time. He trained Chikara Wrestling, which is out of, I think, the Philadelphia area in Pennsylvania. He wrestled with the mask on for years. Eventually, AEW launched, I think, about 5-6 years ago. And then he came up with a gimmick, which is an amazing gimmick. It's very different, very original, where it's kind of like almost like a, let's say, millennial, like whatever kind of a gimmick, where, he wrestles with like his hands in his pockets sometimes, but it's very different and unique that obviously watching it, you kind of suspend disbelief, but it's just so different. It's just really cool. So then I guess in AEW, we start off with that gimmick, or we go before that. And it's awesome. He seems like a really cool guy and whatever else like that. So Christina is, let's call her a super fan of this wrestler, Orange Cassidy. In the show notes, I'll put a couple of pictures of Orange Cassidy so everybody knows what he looks like and kind of become aware of him. So with that said, Christina, how far back does your fandom of Orange Cassidy go? Like, at what point did you first see him and say, wow, this guy's pretty cool, or, I'd like to meet him at some point?
So yeah, I discovered him in April 2020. So it was during the pandemic. And my friend sent me a clip of him, of Orange at Revolution 2020, against Pac. So that was my first time seeing him. Okay, so let me talk about this. My friend sent me the clip, and he said, if Doug were a wrestler. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this sketch comedy show called The State. I was on
Yeah,
MTV.
it was on MTV in the late 90s, I think.
Yes,
Right?
yeah.
Give or take?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a character on there called Doug, who was played by Michael Showalter. And he was like very much like, yeah, man, I'm out of here. You know, it was like exactly what you're talking about, like, you know, like Gen X, like, you know, whatever. And so now Orange Cassidy is based off of the character Andy in Wet Hot American Summer. And Wet Hot American Summer was co-written by Michael Showalter, who played Doug. So in my mind, Orange is actually based off of, you know, Doug, because like
That's
I feel
awesome.
like parts of the character Doug, like, you know, transposed onto Andy. So yeah, so my friend said if Doug were a wrestler, and so like that's pretty much why I clicked on it, because I love Doug, like that's one of my favorite characters. So yeah, I clicked on it, and then out, like he sent me 2 clips. One is of Orange doing like the kicks of doom on Pac, you know, and it's like, you know, the audience going, oh, oh.
So,
And,
real quick, for those that don't know, the kicks of doom, and correct me if I'm wrong, basically it, like Orange Cassidy will put his hands in his pockets and it's very gentle, light kicks. And the crowd's kind of looking at it saying like they're kind of overreacting, but that's kind of like we're all in on the gimmick, I guess you can say. We're all kind of like just kind of playing along with it. That's basically
yes.
what it is, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, ultimately, like, yeah, he's like a slacker wrestler, you know, but like, it's really just a mind game, like, because he actually is really, really good at wrestling. He just doesn't want to,
Right.
is basically. So, like, like, the least amount of effort he can do to wrestle is what he does. So, yeah, so that clip is amazing because you see, like, the dichotomy of him and, you know, like, goes from, like, lazy, you know, apathetic, you know, wrestler, which I identify with, because it's like what Tony Schiavone says, like, you know, some days I just don't give a damn, and neither does Orange. So yeah, I'm just like, wow, like watching this, and then all of a sudden he's like badass and like, you know, like putting, like going like outside the ring with his hands in his pockets, you know, and jumping on the Pac and all this. So it's like insane. So
Yeah, his physicality is great in the fact that, like, again, he plays the slacker gimmick, but he'll do like a kip up with his hands in his pockets.
yeah.
Which, I mean, I've tried just doing a kip up altogether, and I almost break my butt every single time. Like, it's difficult. Now, to do it without the momentum of your hands, like kind of helping yourself up, like, is damn near impossible. So it's crazy to see it. But like, he's a ridiculously great athlete. He's an awesome performer, entertainer. And Christina, as you said, he's an amazing wrestler. Like, he's done a lot. He comes across really cool. And I'm assuming, I've only met him once or twice, but based on your experiences, he seems like a down to earth, like just like nice guy, right?
Oh yeah, he's super super nice all the time. Like I'm always like super nervous around him, and I'm like kind of like a shy person. So, but and like I used to like be like super anxious, and like, you know, like when you're anxious, you just like do like you try to rush everything because you're like in your head you're just like oh, like I have to get out of here as quickly as possible. But he'd always be like, it's okay, like take your time. There's like nobody around, like it's fine, you know. So yeah, he's like always super nice, and yeah, and like he always like he's always appreciative. I tend to make him a lot of like art and like things. So I made him bracelets. And
Yeah, I saw that recently. I saw I think you called out in your Instagram story some bracelets you made him. Like, he specifically called out those bracelets, which is amazing, right? Like, here's a professional wrestler, celebrity, and like I've been in similar situations where I'm like, these people should have no idea who I am. Like, it's kind of like, who am I? But like the fact that he on a regular basis calls out your bracelets and knows you has to be a really cool feeling, right?
yeah, it's amazing. Like it's just like wow, like it's just like like I can't believe it.
Yeah,
I'm always amazed by him.
Yeah, I have a similar story. So, I mean, obviously, you've gotten close with Orange Cassidy, like he knows who you are, stuff like that. So, I told the story on a different podcast, but I repeat it because I think it's very similar. But I think it's really cool, like when, at least in my opinion, someone who like I've been watching for years, like knows who I am and really shouldn't. So, back in the 80s and 90s, Howard Finkel, he was a WWE EWF ring announcer. Like forever, every time I'd go to a live show, he was always the ring announcer. In 2013, 2014, when I worked for Post Foods, Fruity Pebbles cereal, I got to go to the headquarters up in Stamford, Connecticut, WWE headquarters, which was a really cool experience. Long story short, though, when I was in there, I took a tour of the office and I ran into Howard Finkel just sitting in a cubicle working, which just blew my mind. Right, for like he was like the first employee they had. Like every WrestleMania, he was the ring announcer for. So like for 30 plus years or whatever, like he was always on TV. I walked over to him, was like, "Hey, I'm a huge fan." He's like, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you." Blah blah blah, whatever else like that. I asked for a picture. He was like, "Absolutely, whatever you want." I said, "My name's Jeff. Great to meet you." Blah blah blah. A few years later, a few months later, I went to WrestleMania Access at the Meadowlands, and I happened to run into him. And I was like, and my wife was there with me as well. I was like, Mr. Finkel, it's great to meet you. My name is Jeff. How are you doing? And I'm like, how does this guy know who I am? Like, this does not feel like on any universe it should even make any sense. Like, this is a guy, again, who I don't know what he made. I don't know what his personal life was or whatever. But like, based on just his notoriety and like how big of a name he was, like, there's no way he should know who I am. So I was like, oh, and especially with my wife right there too. It was a really cool experience that like this quote celebrity of sorts like knows my name. My wife seemed impressed. Maybe she wasn't. I don't know. Whatever. So got another picture with him. That was really cool. I saw him probably about 6 months later at a wrestling convention. Same thing again. I was like, Mr. Finkel. He goes, Jeff, how are you doing? And I'm like, how does this keep happening? Like, this guy should not know who I am. So for me, it was a similar situation where I was just blown away that anybody would know who I am, specifically somebody, as I guess famous as he is. Unfortunately, Howard Finkel passed away a couple of years ago. But like, again, like the stories that I have of him and the memories I have of him just completely make him so much better of a person than like I ever could have thought he was, just based on seeing him on TV. So it's, for me, again, it's got to be an amazing feeling or surreal feeling where every time you see, I guess, Orange Cassidy or probably Chuck Taylor, who's one of his tag team partners, like I assume he probably recognizes you as well. Like, hey, Christina, what's going on? Or kind of like, what's the interaction? Is it, oh, it's Christina again? Or kind of like, what is that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're like, oh, it's Christina again. Yeah, like Chuck Taylor and Trent. Like Trent is always like actually the nicest person like ever, probably. Like he's always super nice to me, and like he also wears bracelets I made. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, like Trent will like go out of his way, to say hi to me at the show and stuff. So yeah, like they're great.
That's really cool. So you'd said that a friend of yours sent you a clip of Orange Cassidy in April of 2020, and that's when you first got interested in him. Were you always a wrestling fan, or did this first get you into wrestling, or kind of give you a little background on your wrestling fandom?
Right. No, I didn't like wrestling at all until I watched Orange. And so, I mean, like when I was a kid, like, wrestling was on like in the background sometimes, so like I knew about like, Ultimate Warrior and like all that, from the 80s, but like I didn't really watch it. Like I didn't really pay attention to it. So yeah, like Orange definitely like got me into wrestling. I started, and that's the thing, like I started watching it during the pandemic. So, like, okay, so
which to be fair was probably a time where we all had a lot more free time than we wanted because we're all stuck in the house, and with all the streaming services and cable, what else are you gonna do besides watch wrestling, right? I mean, I have 17 different streaming services for wrestling now, because why not? Because what else was I gonna do those years?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So like that's the thing, like when I first saw the him versus Pac clips, I immediately was like, I have to see like everything I can possibly find about Orange. And back then in 2020, AEW didn't really have that much stuff online yet, like on YouTube. So if you searched for Orange on YouTube, it was all like indie clips, indie shows like Beyond Wrestling. Right. So I pretty much binge watched like all the stuff I could find online on YouTube, which was all indie wrestling. And like he had a match, it was him versus Chris Statlander versus like Kimberly. So that was like the first match I saw. And then there's also a documentary, it's like a 5-minute documentary, and it's like the comedy in wrestling. And it's about Orange Cassidy. It's really just brief, but like you really get to see like an insight to him. It's like the only time he really like kind of talks, like, even though he's still the character. Well, right. He is Orange. But like you get to see like a little bit of insight into how he is, and he like talks about how, he wants to do things differently. He doesn't want to be like everyone else. And so I also just really love that about him, like how unique he is. And, that's like part of why he's so amazing, because he is different. So I watched that. And then AEW was, I think they were filming in like a studio in Georgia or something, like at the time. And then they moved to Daly's Place. So
for those who aren't aware, Daly's Place, just real quick, sorry to interrupt. So during the pandemic, obviously live audiences weren't really a thing. So during the pandemic, AEW Wrestling actually moved to something called Daly's Place. So the owner of AEW is also one of the co-owners of the Jacksonville Jaguars football team in the NFL. So since they own the stadium, and Christina, you know better than I would, correct me if I'm wrong, they created almost like a makeshift outdoor amphitheater of sorts, like in the parking lot of where the Jacksonville Jaguars play football. So you've got the football stadium right there. Then kind of next door, she had kind of an area where they had kind of like walls of sorts and a ring, but it was like an open area. So in theory, when Florida, which, was probably one of the first states to open up, was able to get a crowd, they were able to kind of get away with it because there was an open air. So they had all sorts of different like restrictions that weren't applicable there. Is that fair?
Well, Daly's Place is like an arena, but it's like an outdoor, like it's got a covering, but then there's like the sides are open. Okay. So it does have like the fresh air and everything going through there. So they were able to film there and without audiences for a few months.
Initially. Which real quick on that was pretty crazy because initially when they were doing that, you just had wrestlers in the crowd. So the wrestlers were kind of trying to make each other laugh and kind of just do stupid things for each other because they were the audience at the time, right?
Yeah. There's like on the sidelines, and I think sometimes they had friends and family like in the audience too, like a little bit, but not too much. Right. And then so then eventually they did allow crowds in. Well, not crowds, like a small amount of people in, and I was one of those people. I got a season ticket. So I could go. I drove to Jacksonville. It was a 2.5 hour drive every other week. I went just to see Orange, and it was like at the time I really didn't enjoy driving that much. So it was kind of like pushing me outside my comfort zone in order to go see Orange. And like at the time there wasn't really that much traffic because it was the pandemic, so there wasn't that much people on the road. But so I was like, I got to see the shows at Daly's Place, and it was amazing. Well, there weren't that many people around me, so I kind of so it's kind of weird because my very first live wrestling show was All Out 2020, and that was when Orange had the Mimosa Mayhem match. Okay. And so that, and like to see, like when you see a place like a show being filmed at Daly's Place for a few months, and then to actually get to go there and be there, and like it's like so
surreal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, surreal is the correct word. Yes, it's like wow, like this, and even after All Out, like I used to sit by the steps where Orange ran down to punch Jericho, while his ear was bleeding, and so like every time I would be like, this is where Orange ran down the stairs, and so I'd always think about that, and so it was just so fun. Like I love Daly's Place so much.
That's awesome. So are you familiar with ECW wrestling, like from back in the late 90s?
I haven't watched it, but I heard of it. I know like Orange has talked about it before.
Yeah. So long story short, ECW wrestling for me was kind of what got me into, I guess, almost like non-WWE wrestling. So growing up in the 80s and 90s, I was huge into WWE, WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan, Warrior, stuff like that. ECW wrestling, for those that don't know, was mainly located in the Philadelphia area. They toured a little bit, but for the most part, their big shows were in Philadelphia at a place called the ECW Arena, like every 3 or 4 weeks. When I was, I think, at the end of high school or early college, and when you're 17, 18, 19 years old, your sleeping's a little weird. You watch random stuff on TV, and back in the late 90s, we only had like 30 channels, right? It was not like today where you've got like infinite streaming services and whatever else like that. So it's probably 2 a.m. I was just flipping the channels, and I saw ECW wrestling on MSG Network at like 2 a.m. It was the most ridiculous, crazy thing that I'd ever seen at the time. Like people flying over chairs and ladders and all sorts of wacky stuff, which again in 2024 is fairly tame. But for 1994, 1995 was just ridiculous. People doing like backflips like off of tops of ladders and all sorts of like just nonsense. I saw it on TV for about a year, and I was like, that's just bizarre and amazing. So finally, in summer of 96, I went to my first ECW show at the ECW Arena. And it feels like it was similar to what Christina was talking about, where like you see something on TV for a while and you're like, that's a really cool place. Lots of cool things happened. And then you show up and you see it in person. First of all, when you see it in person, sometimes the building looks a lot smaller than it did on TV. Like the ECW Arena, it was not a very, let's say, great place and not a very great neighborhood. But being there in person, like you could definitely feel it and see it, but it had a very different feel to it. But at the end of the day, right, it was just very strange. It was very odd. Went many times, whatever. Saw lots of I saw early Chris Jericho in ECW. Saw just missed early Rey Mysterio in ECW. Lots of like guys who even today are still big names got their starts in ECW, which was just crazy. So again, Christina was there on the ground floor with AEW, which only opened a year or two before she was there. But going to like, a very different kind of environment with not many people there, and a lot of guys who, got their start, let's say just before AEW or in AEW, seeing them in front of a few hundred people maybe, and seeing where they are today, 4 years later, has got to be amazing, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like they've all grown and they've gotten so much better since then. Especially Orange, like if I can just talk about Orange some more.
Of course. Absolutely.
He like you can see the the growth, the progress that he's made. Especially like with the international championship when he won that. Like he's just like it's just crazy because it's like when he won that, I was like, wow, like it's not going to get more badass than this, like this moment where he's like holding the title and like the orange confetti is going all over him. And then, but then like, no, like he just got better and better and better. And then it's like, last year at All In, he was like, punching his hand in like glass and like, punching people with like glass taped on his hand, and like all bloody and everything. So yeah, like seeing his progress has been, it's like I've been like I just appreciate like how much work and effort they all the wrestlers put into their craft, and they're always changing. Somebody like Chris Statlander too, like she was an alien, and in my head she is still an alien. She's just like undercover now, like trying to understand the government. But but now like you can see like even though she was injured a few times, that didn't stop her, from training. Like she just got stronger and stronger, and it's very like motivating, to watch them all, grow. Even Trent too, he had like a neck surgery as well, and he also he was out when his pec got injured. But they're all back stronger than ever.
Yeah.
So,
and just to add to Christina's story also, so Orange Cassidy, again, the wrestler, great wrestler, definitely been doing everything he can to make himself better as a wrestler, like from a gimmick and from an overall storytelling perspective, very unique and different. So when he was the champion that Christina mentioned, most people bring the title either on their shoulder, around their waist, or something like that. He threw it like a JanSport backpack. Like he literally would go to the ring with the belt in a backpack, which is just foreign. Like most wrestlers want to show it off, want to show how great they are because they have the title. Him, he's kind of like, whatever. I'll put it in a backpack. He just tosses the backpack in the ring like it's nothing. Like that just kind of like adds to the, the slacker gimmick that he has, which I think just makes him that much better.
Yeah, he used to do that too. Like back before AEW, when he was in the indie scene, he had a championship, and it was a throwback to that, to like holding the JanSport backpack. So everyone was always like he did there was like a 3-way world championship match at Daly's Place in Double or Nothing 2021, and it was like him versus Pac versus Kenny Omega, and so like one of the little Easter eggy things, there's like best friends holding the backpack, like in case Orange wins, so that like that you can put the title in there. So yeah,
that's
but
awesome.
he didn't win that, unfortunately. But
you can't win them all. But again, as you know how professional wrestling is, a lot of times it's not about winning; it's about putting on the best show or the most entertaining match. So that's pretty much what's most important, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you started going to AEW wrestling following Orange Cassidy in 2020 during the pandemic. You went beyond that to 2021. When was the first time you ever met Orange Cassidy?
It was in 2020 in December.
Okay.
They had like it was like a very brief like 30-second and they had like plexiglass up, he was wearing a mask, everyone was wearing a mask. It was just like you just like it was like a free meet and greet, like really quick.
Nice.
Just to like say hi, get an autograph, and then they would take the picture of you. And even though it was like very brief, it was still like amazing because like I had been there a few months, like 3 or 4 months at that point, and like I was like, oh my god, I get to like be within like a few feet of Orange. And he was, and I had like a mask that had oranges on it, and he was like, oh, I like your mask, like it was so cool. And I was like extra dorky then, so like I was dressed like him. I had like the denim on and everything.
Nice.
And my picture is just like very like I felt like I was gonna like pass out. I was like, it felt like so dark, and but then the picture wasn't that dark, so I was like, I think it was probably about to faint.
That's awesome. Like one thing that I tell people, like people are, cause again, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, and for the last 25 plus years, I've gone to conventions, tried to meet wrestlers, and people always ask me, like, why do you like wrestling? You realize it's not real. I'm like, okay, that's true. But you do watch TV shows, you watch movies, those aren't real. They're like, yeah, I guess. And I'm like, can you actually see them in person? They're like, no. I was like, well, professional wrestling, you can. I'm like, okay, so we saw Deadpool 3 recently in theaters, right? Great movie, a lot of fun, all that kind of stuff, right? Ryan Reynolds, amazing actor, whatever you want to think about him, right? But at the end of the day, if you're a huge Deadpool fan and you're like, I want to meet Ryan Reynolds, like that's not going to happen, right? Like no amount of money for the most part can make that happen. Most professional wrestlers, you know, what name the price, it probably varies wrestler by wrestler, but you go to a show, you see the show, you think the guy's amazing, the wrestler's amazing, male, female, whatever. There's usually some kind of an opportunity, either at a convention, a pre-show meet, after show meet, whatever, to get a picture with them and to have like this interaction with them. And it definitely is a very different situation, right? See, Deadpool, credits roll, you go home, kind of is what it is. You go to SmackDown or you go to AEW or you go to GCW or whatever else like that, then you can go potentially meet the wrestler or wrestlers afterwards and continue the experience, which is a lot more intimate. It's a different situation. And you can then, you know, like Christina has and like I have, create lifelong memories and have pictures of like that situation, which takes it completely to the next level, which is something I try to explain to people when they just tell me wrestling's fake, why do you like it? I'm like, well, there's a lot more to it than just that, you know?
Yeah, wrestling is much more interactive. Even Orange says like the more you cheer for me, the better I do. You know, so it's like yeah, like the fan interaction. That's the and like, you know, I can appreciate how much the fans do add to the show since I was there when there were no fans there, you know, or really very little amount of fans. So like, because like there are certain things that like I didn't actually understand until the fans got back in. Like Miro, for example, like he.
Right.
You're supposed to boo him. You know, he does things on purpose so that he gets booed. And
Right.
like, I don't know, I didn't like once I started seeing fans do the booing, like then it clicked for me, like, oh. Like I don't know, it's like stupid of me, but
no, it makes total sense because I mean to make it
more.
It makes total sense because to make a good guy that much better or that much like more cheered, you have to have his nemesis, right? You have to have somebody who everyone's going to hate the exact amount or worse on the other side. You can't have, in theory, all good guys are all bad guys because then neither of them are really going to get that strong reaction or engagement that you're looking for. So, and if you're new to the company as you were back in 2020, like you didn't necessarily have like that experience or that perspective. But then when you saw, you know, crowd booing one guy, you're like, oh, they don't like this guy, but they love that guy. So that kind of helps the entire mindset of like, why do I like this guy and not like that guy, right?
Right, yeah. And then like also like the chanting, you know, like some like the things that they come up with. Like, it always adds to it. Like you know, Hangman Adam Page versus Adam Cole, the crowd would cheer like, let's go Adam. Adam sucks. So it's like you don't know which Adam they're talking about.
Which is fantastic. I mean that's where wrestling is really fun, is when like the crowd is so into it, has, you know, ridiculous chants. And like the wrestlers, as you've said before, feed off those chants, which definitely helps and makes the match that much better.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then like also like if the people in the front row get their own like kind of experience, you know,
Right.
like they get to see like the wrestlers like right there in the like pit, you know. And like I know Chuck Taylor said like, oh, the fans have a totally different show in the front row.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, it's just it's like really fun to go.
Which is crazy. I think I mentioned on the pod before. So about a month and a half ago, my family and I went to Japan. And while we were in Japan, we spent about 2 weeks there. We went to a Stardom women's wrestling show, which was fantastic. Like Stardom is the best female wrestling in the world. I think they train or they're owned by New Japan Pro Wrestling. So it's like that next level. Going to a pro wrestling show in Japan is so different than going to a pro wrestling show in America, in the fact that they are very quiet. They only cheer or make noise for like certain moments, but for the most part, like it's super, super quiet, like weirdly quiet. My wife, myself, my kids were there. Whenever I said to them, I said, just listen to what the rest of the crowd does, follow along, and let's not be those, you know, 4 dopey Americans being jerks in the front row. Like just sit there and just follow everybody else. It was insane. Like it was hard hitting action. The wrestlers were amazing, but like when something big happened, like everyone, ooh, or there was a big cheer or whatever else like that. It was very different. Like I've been going to shows here in the States for, I guess, 35 years or so at this point. Like I had never experienced anything anywhere even close to that. It was just such a great experience. Like I loved it. But then at the same time, to what Christina said, like I sat first row for Raw, for SmackDown, for various pay-per-views, and like it is a very different show because especially when wrestlers know the camera's not on them, sometimes they'll goof it up for people in the front row. Like they'll make faces, they'll kind of say dumb things, things that crack themselves up. It's really unique, I guess, sitting there versus again sitting all the way last row, like at Madison Square Garden, like you're seeing, you know, basically the TV show versus sitting up front, you're seeing, you know, almost like a show made for you, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so much better. Like, like, well, being there is, in my opinion, like the best experience. Like, even if you're not in the front row, like just being there, getting like it's just a totally different like feeling. Like I don't know, like sometimes watching it on TV for me, it's like not as like it's harder for me to follow for some reason. I don't know, like, but like being there, like I just can concentrate better when I'm there in person, and you know, hearing all the crowd interactions and like the cheering and you know, you get to see everything. Like sometimes the camera like cuts away from things and so like
so funny story. I was gonna say, funny story in that. So Christina, have you watched House of Glory wrestling before out of Queens, New York?
No.
You have not. Okay, so they are on Fight TV, Triller TV streaming service. A buddy of mine, Joey Silver, Sweet Cheeks, wrestles for House of Glory. So he he's an opening battle royal this past Saturday or Friday, I guess it was. And he did really well, but he was like the final three that got eliminated. Later in the show, he came out and interfered in a match. Like he had a ridiculous like spear like off of the walkway, like down to the floor. The camera completely missed 95% of it. The announcers, I guess, didn't know what was going on. So it was almost completely no-sold, which was crazy because I saw kind of in the background, like this happened. And I'm like, who did that? What was that? And it's just never even referenced versus like if you're sitting there like in the crowd, you saw it, you understood it, and they probably added so much to it. So, you know, watching it on TV can definitely make or break a show, right? If the announcers are clued in, you see what's going on, it definitely helps. Sometimes you see things cameras don't pick up, you know, in person. So it can go both ways. I love the live experience because again, you can feed off of the crowd. You can kind of watch what you want, especially in like multi-man matches or battle royals. You know, the production tends to focus on one or two favorites or one or two stories, but you can see so much more when you're there in person, which is just crazy. I'm sorry I interrupted you before.
Oh, no, it's okay. So yeah, like at Daly's Place, like there's two examples. Like it was the Beach Break show where Orange popped out of the cake and he put Penelope Ford's face into the cake and like after that whole thing, it was Kip Sabian and Penelope getting married, and Miro was like the guy. I forgot what they were doing, but like marrying them, yeah. And after like Chuck Taylor and Orange got revenge on them basically, and then Orange and Chuck Taylor Chuck Taylor took a swig of like champagne and then he went to pour it into Orange's mouth. But they didn't show that on TV that week. And so, but I was there, I got a recording of it. So, you know, like, it's like, why didn't they show that, you know? But then they did end up showing it like the following week as like a recap or whatever. But things like that. Like, and then also there was a time when Orange like was on commentary and with Excalibur at the table. It was like, there was like a multi-man match going on with best friends in it. And Orange, so like when he wasn't sleeping at the commentary table, Orange did get up and like gave Excalibur a hug, but they didn't show it. But I had like a really far away video of it, so I was able to post that too. So it was, you know, at least I get like some of the interactions that are not on TV. Yeah.
How often do you say you go to shows? Like, do you? I mean, I see in your Instagram and in your social media, it seems like you're always at shows. Like, do you go? Would you say once a week, once a month? Like, on average, how often are you at wrestling shows?
I mean, it kind of varies based on what's going on. It used to be like way too much. It used to be like every week almost. But I kind of calmed down a little bit since then. And now it's probably like once a month, like maybe twice a month, it depends on what's going on. Like sometimes there's like last minute things that pop up, like, you know, they'll announce like an independent wrestling show. And I'll just be like, okay, well, I have to go to that. That was like, there's like one in January, or was it February? It was in Minneapolis. And
is that the Mall of America show? Is that the one?
No, well, that was another one.
Okay.
That was Orange did do Mall of America. What year was that? I think that was 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I did go to that. But then there was another one that First Wrestling did at what's it called, First Avenue, and it was like -8-degree weather there, and like I had never been in that cold, that amount of cold before.
Yeah.
So like I like ordered like thermal pajamas to like go there, and like I stood outside in -8 degrees for like an hour just like get in the front row. So yeah, so like I'll do that. I don't know, I'm kind of like if like it, like I like to go when I know Orange is going to be there.
Sure.
So like with the Zack Sabre Jr. match that was at Forbidden Door, like when I found out that was announced, it's like that's Orange's dream match. Like I have to go to that. So I'm kind of just like I just kind of wait and see what happens, and then I'll go to it if I need to.
So do you generally? So I mean, AEW obviously it seems like is kind of like your preferred. I mean, Orange Cassidy's there. Do you generally just go to independent shows that Orange is at, or do you ever kind of like look on the web and say, "Hey, it looks like a fun show. I'm going to go to that as well," or is basically Orange your draw?
Well, Orange is my draw. Usually, like I'll usually
Right.
go every now and then though. Like I have been to like a New Japan wrestling show.
Okay.
Like there was one that was in Tampa. I think that was 2 years ago. That had like Wheeler Yuta and Rocky were in it,
Okay.
and so like last minute I decided to go to that too, just to see them, because I do love them too, Yuta and Rocky, and like I love Ishii as well. So you know, every now and then I'll do that, but I like to just like I'm like Orange focused. So yeah.
Do you do any WWE, or that's not within your interest at this point?
No, yeah, I don't really watch that.
That's fair. I mean,
like nothing wrong with it.
that's fair. I mean, I've gotten in and out over the years. At this point, I'm kind of out of it. Just I went to WrestleMania, and you'll probably hear in a future or past podcast, me and my buddy left before the main event. Like legitimately, the first night we saw the entrances from Seth, Roman, The Rock, and Cody. And as soon as the entrances were over, we just left. We left to go to a GCW show because we were like, that's great. We don't really care. Going to something else, whatever. Which everyone around us was like, what are you guys doing? This is the biggest match of all time. And we're like, yeah, we could do without this one. So again, like I also have limited interest in WWE. There's certain wrestlers that I guess I like or I'm interested in. But in general, I'm more independent wrestling. I'm more AEW wrestling. For me, it just feels, I don't know. I don't want to say less produced, but like it feels more real, or I don't know, something to it, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's more like, I don't know, like it's not like intimate or whatever, but like it's just more personal. I don't know like how to explain it. Like it doesn't seem like an over the top production. It's like just like kind of cute and like, you know, its own thing. Like it's like an alternate, like
WWE almost feels like they're making a movie, which I mean, years
Right.
ago, music fans always said, we make movies here. This isn't wrestling, this is movies. Same kind of a thing, right? Versus like AEW and GCW and TNA wrestling. They don't really feel like the same. Like they feel, I don't know, like you said, I think more intimate, but also for me, it's just more interesting to me. Like they don't necessarily like, I don't know, years ago, WWE, WF used to have like a plumber wrestler and like a farmer wrestler. It's like all super gimmicks. So like, it's kind of like, yeah, I can't really relate to that kind of thing because it didn't feel real. Versus at the same time, WCW, which was their competition, would have like this guy and that guy and like this tough guy and stuff like that. So it just felt more, I don't know, more legitimate, I guess you can say.
Yeah, like they can be more creative and like do things their own way because it's like they have that room to like experiment kind of like, whereas I think WWE probably like they stick to like you know like their little things that they do.
Right, like an Orange Cassidy, I would say. Like if he were to, let's say, go to WWE, I feel like he would show up. His name would be like Frank Jones. They put him in like little shorts. Maybe he's a referee, maybe he's just a manager. I don't know. But like Orange Cassidy would not be able to grow into what he is today. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I can't even see him there. Like I can't even imagine him there. Just
yeah. I mean, maybe one day. I mean, I'm sure WWE probably pays better. It's a very different environment situation they have there. But from a, let's say, wrestling creative perspective, for me anyway, if you're more into like watching the actual sport of wrestling, it's not usually the place to go.
Yeah, like I know that they do at AEW appreciate and enjoy their freedom, their artistic creative freedom. So like they like to be able to do what they want, and like nobody tells them what to do really. So
Absolutely.
and like it's probably like they all like I think most of them are friends there, you know. Like how cool is that you can just like work with your friends, you know, and
So
like
great.
just have a fun environment. Like of course you want to stay there.
Of course, they work with their friends, they travel with their friends, like, you know, they go around the country, around the world, stuff like that. And just go on a field trip with your buddy or whatever for work, get paid for it sounds fantastic, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And the way wrestling works, obviously, you know, they work together, they make each other better, they both put on fantastic matches, and at the end of the day, everybody wins, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So earlier you mentioned, obviously, that you've met a bunch of wrestlers, specifically Orange Cassidy and his friends, things like that. And you have like made bracelets and given them bracelets and such. Is there anything you collect? So like with all these meetings, like for me personally, like recently, my biggest collections are pictures with wrestlers, which I've been doing for years, and trying to get like action figures signed. So at that show 2 years ago, where my daughter and I met Orange Cassidy, we got a Orange Cassidy AEW figure signed. We got a Nyla Rose, we got a bunch of different figures signed, do it all the time. Is there anything you go to these shows or these meet and greets and say, I want to collect X? Or do you just kind of like go get the interaction, get the picture, and that's kind of what you're looking for?
I mean, mostly I do enjoy like getting pictures, like that's like my main priority. But I do like always like having him sign something as well. Like I love having him sign the picture, like the professional pictures. Like I have a few up here. Like I
Nice.
love
So is that like at and if I can see it correctly, like at a convention or whatever, you get a picture with him, then you get him to sign that picture of you with him?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. I do that a lot as well. We've had a couple of local conventions here. We had Wrestle Show back in May, where lots of wrestlers were there. Sky Blue, Layla Hirsch, people like that. Where I would go get the pro picture, and then as soon as it was done, Abaddon as well, get the pro picture. Then afterwards, run over to their table, get them to sign the picture. Which for me is just like the ultimate souvenir, right? It's basically you've got the picture with them. For me, I'll get the digital also, so I can actually download it and have a clean picture. Get them to sign it. You could frame that. Now you've got kind of like this was my day. This is an awesome just experience I had with them. Which it sounds like that's what you do as well. You get the picture professionally done with him, get it printed out, get him to sign it, and now all of a sudden you got an awesome souvenir.
Yeah, exactly. And then like I also do like the artistic photo pictures, you know, that they have on their like, you know, table, like Orange is probably like he's like, you probably have all of these already. And I'm like, well, I have that one. But he usually has like one new one, you know, that I don't have yet. So I'll be like, okay, I'll get that one, you know. And it's like there was one he had where it was like him with Best Friends and Danhausen that I didn't have, and he signed it and he wrote, you know, me with like an arrow pointing to him.
Right.
So like I enjoy collecting that aspect of it too. Like he usually writes something unique on it.
Awesome.
For me. So that's like really nice. Like that one was the one I'm pointing at. If you're just listening to audio, I'm pointing at a picture that was at GalaxyCon, and it was on St. Patrick's Day, which I'd actually forgotten about. And so it was like he wrote Happy St. Patrick's Day on it.
Which again is a great memory, because years from now you look at it and say, right, that was on St. Patrick's Day, obviously, because that's what he wrote, and he wouldn't have wrote that otherwise. So that's fun. Like that's really, really cool.
Yeah, like I would have forgotten that that's St. Patrick's Day. So it's cute. Like he does like stupid stuff like that. Like
very, very cool. So we're running a little late on time at this point. Okay. But one thing I wanted to mention to you that you probably don't know, because I've never said it to anyone before, is so my buddy's brother went to high school with Orange Cassidy. They were actually on the high school wrestling team together in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. So my buddy grew up in Stewartsville, and just I think west of there, just before we reach Easton, Pennsylvania, is Phillipsburg, Pennsylvania, or Phillipsburg, New Jersey, which has always been huge into amateur wrestling, high school wrestling. So I think my buddy's brother was probably about 2, maybe 3 years older than Orange, but they were on the wrestling team together, which I know that because 2 years ago when I met Orange Cassidy and I posted the picture, my buddy was like, hey, this guy went to my high school. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, and Kyle was on the wrestling team with him. So I was like, okay, so I got to text Kyle. And Kyle's like, yeah, I went to high school with him, blah, blah, blah. So I thought that was a really just weird, random story that I never even thought of or whatever, but I guess that's how it goes, right? I mean, it makes sense, right? He trained with Chikara, which was in Pennsylvania, so not too far from there is is that area. So it was random, I guess. You never know.
Yeah, that's so awesome though. Like, wow. Like then, like imagine, like like wow, like that guy got to wrestle with him, when he was like growing up and like learning, like that's so cool.
Yeah, it's so random. Like thinking back, so I graduated high school class of '95 from Edison, New Jersey, and like the only person I had that I went to high school with that's notable, and you probably don't know who this is poker champion Philip Ivey. He's won like millions throughout the years. I've read stories about him that apparently, like in high school, he would like sneak out of school or sneak out of his parents' house and go play like poker games in New Brunswick or something like that, which I was like, wow. He used to kick my ass in basketball in high school. That's all I knew of him at the time. And apparently he's like one of the greatest like poker players in the world, which was amazing to me. So that was random. We had Susan Sarandon, but she graduated high school like 30 years before I did. So not really a lot of names out of my high school. So again, my buddy going to high school with Orange Cassidy, I thought was a really, really cool thing that it was at the time. And it's somebody who, years later now is this big superstar on TV that like, we all love to watch wrestle, love to entertain us,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Anything else that you'd like to share or anything you want to talk about before we call it a night?
No, that's okay. We got everything.
Awesome. Cool. Christina, this has been amazing. Did you want to plug your socials or anything like that before we go?
Sure. I am Christina.attempts.life on Instagram and Christina_tries on Twitter. Yeah. I do stuff sometimes. That's what I do.
Awesome. Well, Christina, this has been amazing. So before we go, just wanted to thank everyone for joining me. All the feedback we've gotten so far on the podcast has been amazing. So keep it coming, whether it be via Instagram, via the email, whatever it is, in all your podcast apps. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Reminder that we're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Castbox, Good Pods. Make sure to DM me if you want to be a future guest or if you have any feedback for the show. Outside of that, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye, everybody.